Now let's have a look at what source of data is involved in data science and how we can handle different types of data. So basically, in if I categorize the total types of data into two broader scales or two broader categories, we can say that the data can be either structured data or it can also be some unstructured data, right? So this can be these the two major categories of data. It can either be structured or it can either be unstructured data. And from unstructured data, it also includes semi-structured data, right? So semi-structured data will be a kind of data which has some structured and some unstructured data, so it can be a combination of these two. Also, the data which is structured or unstructured, it can be quantitative or it can also be qualitative data. So we will be looking in detail the differences between these two types of data, and also between the quantitative data and the qualitative data. So let's begin with the structured data, and we can also call structured data as the organized data. So the structured data is the data that can be thought of as observations and characteristics, right? So we can think of a structured data as a number of observations or some underlying characteristics related to different objects. Maybe it is usually organized using a table method, right? So that's why we also call it a relational database, because that relational database is consist of a number of tables. So the data is stored in tables in the forms of rows and columns. So the structured data will mostly be the relational data, and the storage of data will be in the form of tables, and the tables will be consisting of different rows and columns. In unstructured data, on the other hand, the unstructured data will be more unorganized, because in unstructured data we mostly don't have relations, and that's why the data is not in that much of the organized form. The data can exist as a free entity and does not follow any standard organization hierarchy. So in an unorganized data set, we can expect that there will be no standard hierarchy that is followed in the maintenance of the data, and in simple words we can say that the data exists as a free entity in unstructured data. Now the semi-structured data, this data exhibits some amount of structure but is not as defined as structured data. So the examples of the structured and unstructured data can include, for example, most data that exists in text form, including server logs and Facebook posts, is unstructured, right? Because we are not following any kind of standard hierarchy in these things. So that's why this kind of data will be unstructured data. On the other hand, if we talk about some scientific observations, such as different observations which are recorded by scientists in different kind of experiments, so the data coming from that experiments will be collected and organized and then stored in a specific format. So we can say that this kind of data will be structured data, because it will be following some kind of hierarchy and a proper format will be established in order to store this data. So this is the basic two examples of unstructured and structured data. A genetic sequence of chemical nucleotides, for example, this is a name of one kind of nucleotide. So this is unstructured. Even if we order the nucleotides, then we cannot form any specific descriptors for the sequence, right? Because this is a sequence. So initially, by looking at a visual observation on this sequence, we cannot have a clear understanding, right? So this is why most of the sequences using row column format without taking a further look. So this kind of data which is not in a very good structure or format, or if I say that most of the unstructured data usually required some kind of pre-processing before we further process them through some algorithms, and this is called data pre-processing. So the main machine learning algorithms, the basic or classical machine learning algorithms that were designed to tackle structured data, right? So they basically work mostly on structured data, and if you want to use those machine learning algorithms on unstructured data, then we need to bring that data to some appropriate form so that the machine learning algorithms could be applied on that data. And in order to bring that data from raw format to a good format, we have to pre-process that data. For example, if we have this kind of textual data which is written in front of you, this we can say that this sentence or this textual data consists of a number of characteristics, and those characteristics can involve, for example, word count, how many words are there in this sentence, what is the phrase count, the existence of certain special characters, if there are some special characters in this sentence, or the relative length of the text, or if we want to pick out some topics. So these are some of the basic characteristics which reside in all sorts of textual data. So for example, we can have different observations. For example, we can perform a word count on this sentence so that we can know that how many times a specific word has appeared in the sentence, and then we can have different observations, or we can have some predictions out of that, that whether it belongs to some sports data or some political data. So there can also be some special characters present in a sentence, and we can have a guess, or we can have an observation from those special characters. For example, if there is a question mark, then we can see that whether there is some kind of question in the sentence, or what does that question mark represent. So this was one of the examples in which we can see that we can have some textual data, and we can have some understanding and observations by observing some characteristics of the textual data. The other kind of data can be in the form of images, right? For example, you can see we have different images here, and we want to have different understanding of these images, and for that we might need to bring out some specific information from those images. For example, in this case, you will be seeing that we are basically finding the edges or corners in the image. So another examples related to image can be related to the segmentation. So we perform different kind of segmentation techniques on colored images, and their technique can convert this kind of images into some kind of, so we are basically generating a map in this image which is depicting different objects in this. So this is the map of the pixels which contains different sorts of objects in the image. And another kind of segmentation is the region based segmentation, in which we give a seed and we want to grow it, right? So we basically, here we are basically segmenting different objects present in an image, right? So they can be different techniques which can help us to convert or to segment objects in different images. So there are a lot of different other different techniques that we can apply on images, and that could help us to uh, obtain or identify specific information. For example, most of the time we can apply different sorts of masks or filters, and these filters help us to identify images, the corners or edges in certain images. And we can also have some other kind of filters or masks, and these different sorts of filters help us to perform different operations on the images. For example, to sharp an image, or to blur an image, or to smooth an image. So we can perform different operations with the help of different filters to apply different sorts of effects on different images. And we will also look into the convolution operation, which helps us to extract different features from the images. We will be talking in detail about these things when we will start looking into the machine learning topic. Now, after having some knowledge or some understanding of different sorts of data that can involve in data science, some structured data and unstructured data. Now let's have a look that what is the difference between a qualitative data and quantitative data.